Hello and welcome to this webinar today on the managed payroll version of the Moorepay software. My name is Edward Evans and I'm one of the training consultants with Moorepay, and I will be going through the session with you today. So thank you for your time. As I say, they take an hour or two to go through, so listening on this, and hopefully it will be of some benefit for you. Before I start, I would like to just go through just a few of the things that we will be going through on the system today, so you can see those on the screen here. So we'll start with the basic things like logging in, navigating the home page, using hotkeys and the like as well. We'll also have a look at adding starters and leavers, viewing employees' personal information, contractual records, that kind of thing, and also how to provide access rights to the employees if you're going to be allowing them to use the self-service part of the system. Also, that will include resetting their passwords, getting them back into the system if they lock themselves out, and that kind of thing. We will then have a look at submitting temporary payments on the system too. So if you have things like commission and the like, how to put that in on the system, and also how to put permanent payments in as well, things like car allowances and the like, salaries, that kind of thing. Once we've been through the payments and how to put those in, we will then have a look at how you lock down the payroll so that we can process it for you, and how to view your pay slips for the employees, print them off, etc. So a lot depends on your own setup as far as that goes, but we will go through that aspect. After that, we will then show you how to go through clearing down the payroll so that you can then start running everything for the month after that. So that's what we'll be going through today. And if I just close this down here now, so we don't need that. And the first thing, obviously, that we're looking at is the login screen. So I'm going to log in now as an administrator. I would point out at this juncture that this is a demonstration database. We're not allowed to view real information. We're not allowed to see any client information. So this has been all fabricated for us so that we can use it for the training purposes. Obviously, there might be slight differences between your system and ours because, of course, it is tailored more to your own requirements. But essentially, what you have here is what will be on your own system as well. So when you first log in, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, you will see your own name. Obviously, that's not my name, but that would normally be your own name that you'd see there. And below that, what your position is within the system. So in this case, Abby Jones is a system administrator. There is also two other defaults that can be in the system, which are employee default and a manager. For the payroll software, you tend to find that you'll only have administrators and employees. Managers are for more with the HR side of it. You can have others as well, but they are bespoke, so you can put those in or we can put them in for you. But what you'll find today is that we really only have the two, which is the administrator and the employee. So the first thing I'm going to do is just go through the bar at the top of the screen and just show you what each of the functions are at the top there. So I'm going to start with the MP button, and for that I'll need to go into another screen. So if we go into personnel and then hire, which is where you actually one way that you can set up new starters, that will then take us to the starter screen. All the MP button does is takes you back to the home screen again. So if you have gone down quite a way through the menus, you can just click that and it'll take you back to this part of the screen again. You'll notice in the middle there are a number of shortcuts. We won't be going through those today because they are all in the navigator on the left hand side. So it's better to show you where they are in the navigator rather than using them from the middle, so that you never know where they are if you ever needed to use them yourself. But also for the simple reason that what we have in the middle there might be slightly different for yourselves, because again, it depends on your implementation. So the next button that we have on here is, I've mentioned the navigator already on the left hand side. This hamburger button is a technical term. If we click on that, it will close the navigator. That's just because there are some screens that you go into where there's a lot of information, it fills the screen, it's easier to see it if you've got the navigator closed. Equally, the right hand panel, which they call the widget, if we close that down, it just gives you more space again. So it's just so that you know that the options there, you can actually open the screen up, and it's always beneficial to do that. For things like the higher screen and the like, it's much better to have that. So we then open up the screens again so that we've got it back the way it was. If we then go into the next one, which one of the customers that I spoke to recently said, if the first one is a hamburger, then this must be a bar of chocolate. So the bar of chocolate actually opens up the dashboard for us. Now you'll notice here there are a series of layouts. I've got one selected here with 3 windows on it. And the reason for that, if I scroll down a bit, I have these 4 options below it, which are various bits of information about employees. You may find that you've got a lot more in there than we have, because again, it depends on your implementation, and whichever of the boxes that are ticked, they're the ones that you'll see on the dashboard. So if I click view at the top here, and there you go, you can see that we have a number of pie charts there, and you can see various information there about the headcount, employee status department, and their age distributions. Now, if you want to change that, so if I wanted to have a 2-window layout and just take out the age distributions, if I save that, it just changes the data. So what you have there, you can tailor that again to whatever you want. Now, as far as this goes, this information that you can see on the screen here, you can actually present that in a number of ways as well. So if you want to, you can print it out, and you can also save it onto the computer if you want to. Obviously, you can refresh the screen as well, and this will actually open it out into one big screen too. So you can see the pie and its slices on one screen there. So again, if we use this one, it's a little bit better because there's more information. And if you hover over each one, then it divides the slices of the pie up for you as well. So that's the dashboard. You can also change the name of the dashboard if you want to. So you can have whatever you want in there. But also, because as I mentioned, you may have a lot more options on here than I do. And that means that if you put them all on the dashboard, it could just get messy. So you also have the option to create 2 additional dashboards as well. So you can split your information down into 3 different levels if you want to. So that's a dashboard. Moving on to the right-hand side of the screen now, you then see the team view. And all the team view is for is to split it between whether you can see all of the staff, which is what we're doing at the moment, or whether you just want to see your own personal details. So if you click on that, it will then just remove 2 of the little people at the shoulders of the main one there, and you will then just see your own personal data. Now again, there might be differences in what you can see on the system here. It won't necessarily be exactly the same, but you can do things like change your personal details if you want to, contact details, etc. I would point out at this juncture that if you give employees self-service access, they can also see these options as well, so they can change their address and that kind of thing. The system will notify you of that if you do give them self-service access. They won't have the same level of access as you have, so they won't have access to the administrative functions or anything, but this is essentially what they can see. And the other thing is they won't see much about their colleagues either, whereas you will have full information. They will only have access to view business emails, business extensions, phone numbers, that kind of thing. So that's the personal screen. You can also view your payslips and the like from there as well. But I'm going to go back to the main team view now, which is the one that you log in as default, because the next thing we're going to have a look at is the favorite screen. So with the favorites screen, if we just go to the left hand side here, you can see that there, my favorites. You can actually save lots of different things in there. You can save website addresses, you can save reports, links to different screens in the system, and you can even save notes on there as well. So to do that, you just click on add a favorite, and it gives you this screen here. Now you can see you've got the add button there, which gives you the options. So the e-note is like a post-it note. So a lot of people stick them all over the desktops, their electronic versions. Some more traditional people prefer to just stick them all over the monitors instead, and the desk and everywhere else. This one, if you save it, will just save into the favorites. The link allows you to generate links to web addresses, so you can put in all your favorite websites that you use in relation to payroll, and you will be able to access them straight away. The extract is a report, so you can create your own reports in the system, which I'll show you shortly, but you can also save those in your favorites as well, which is a little bit quicker if you want to access them a lot. And then at the bottom there you've got activity, and that's just basically a function within the system. So you can save the pages so that you can just go straight to them instead of messing around trying to find them. There's also a folder option, but all that's for is if you have lots of favorites, you can create different folders for each of them and put them into that. So it just compartmentalizes things a bit for you. So as far as how you create these things, first of all, you click on add and then decide what you want. So in this case, if you wanted to do an e-note, I actually have one created on the system here. So we just do e-note, and I could call it new note, but we've got one here called another note. So if we click on that, and you can see that all you do, you just give it a caption name, another note, text, another note, and then save it at the top. It will then appear in this list here. So you can see here on the favorites, we've got another note, and there you go, another note. So that's the notes, and they all work more or less the same, really. There's not a lot of difference. So if you wanted to add a link, for instance, we have the HMRC one there, so you click on link and it would then bring this up. So all you do is you put your name in for the website in the caption, and then the address there, and then once you've saved it, you can click on the link. So we've got HMRC there, and it will just open the screen up for you. So again, nice and straightforward. Same thing goes with the extract. So on the extract link there, we have a number of different ones. If we click on that, these have all been created by people in the system. So we'll so there's already been one saved in there, but all you do is you select the one that you want to save, click OK, and that would then appear in the list. So in this case, it's this test one here. So all you do then is click on the screen and then run process, and it will generate the report. I won't do that just yet because I'll show you how to do that later on in the actual extract screen, but just for now, it says no parameters. That's nothing to worry about. It just means it doesn't have any criteria that needs to be set before you run it. So that one, you could just run it and it would generate the report for you. And then a final thing that you have on there, I'm not going to go in and create folders and everything, but you've got activities on there. So if you choose an activity, so for instance, you can see I've got Payslips there in the menu. So if I type in just the first part of the word Payslips, you see it there, you just click OK, and it would then save that into the system. So if I come out of that, you can see I've got Payslips there, and if I click on that, it just takes you straight into it. So that's how you use the favorites. As I say, it's all quite straightforward, really. The next one that we're going to have a look at, so if you want to create a favorite, but you don't know where the thing is that you're looking for, then you can go into the search function just here. So if we just close down the favorites and go into search, once again, if we just use something basic like Payslips, you do need to have a rough idea of what the thing is called, otherwise you won't be able to find it. You can't type penguin in, it won't give you anything. But as long as you have a rough idea, and most of them are fairly logical as far as the names go, so you'll normally have Won't have too much trouble finding them, but I'm going to find the payslips there. So I just select that, click OK, and it will then open the screen up for me. Not only that though, as you'll see on the left hand side on the navigator, it is also showing me that screen is in the payroll menu, and then it's in the sub-menu pay and pension letters, and then there's payslips. So as I say, that'll take you there if you wanted to. Once you know it's there, you can put it into the favorites so you don't have to do it again, but it is very easy to use the search function. We then have notifications. Now you may find that you don't actually get much by way of notifications if you're only using the system for payroll, because generally speaking, there isn't a lot that you need to be notified about if you're just running payroll. I did mention earlier that employees can self-serve if they want to, so you can give them the access to change their addresses and bank details and that kind of thing. And also if you're doing things like running expenses and timesheets into the system where they fill those in themselves for authorization, then they would send you notifications as well. So when that happens, they would flag up in this box here with a link to the screen that you need to go to view that information. They would also send you an email as well, so you wouldn't just have to rely on logging in here. The administrator would get an email about the notification too. And if you don't do it, it would show in the to-do list. So if you've got an authorization, like a timesheet or something, then it would be flagged up in here as well. The next menu that we have here is the settings menu, and there are a number of options on here that we need to go through. I'll start at the bottom here with the mapper. The mapper allows you to import data, basically. So if you need to import a lot of information about staff, for instance, then you can use this. The templates are built into it, so if you want additional ones, then they have to be put in by ourselves. You'd have to speak to somebody in the implementation team or the service team about that later on if your implementation's always happened. But if you click on open, it will then give you a list of the reports that are available that you can generate. So you've got employee master file there, which is just basic employee information. If we click on that, it will then bring this screen up. Now, if you know what's in the screen, if you've already created the file, you can import it. But if you don't know what's in it, if you go to help and then go to file layout, it will actually give you a list of the options that are on the menu. But the easier way I find is to go into CSV format, because if you do that, it will then save you a copy of the CSV file, which you can open up. And then once you've opened that up on the system, you can then feed the information in directly and from whatever database you've got for it. So on here, you can see it's got company name, surname, first forename, etc. So all you'd have to do is fill in all the employee details on that, save it, and then once you've saved it, browse for it on the system. So that happens to be this one here that I've just created. And then once you click open on there, it's better to validate first because that will tell you if there are any errors, but you could just import it straight away if you wanted to. But after you validate it, click validate and then run, and it'll tell you if there's any errors on the file. And then once you've done that, you'd have to browse for it again, pick it up, perform update, run, and it would then import the data for you. So it's quite straightforward to use. It's more of a question of the data and how long it takes to get into the CSV file, really. But that's the mapper. The next option that we have there, you see, is analytics. Now, we're not going to go through that today because that is more of a bespoke thing, and it will depend on the information that you want out of it. It tends to be a different session, but you may even find if you've not got analytics, you won't actually have that option. So we won't worry too much about that one. This one though, the extractor. So the extractor, I mentioned that in the favorites because this allows you to tailor your own reports. Obviously, there are already reports in the system. So just while that loads up, you can see at the bottom here, we've got reports. And you'll tend to find that a lot of the data you want is in here anyway. So for instance, if we click on employee list by department, it will allow us, you can actually choose which staff you want to see in there. So it's up to yourself whether you include or exclude them by using the plus and minus buttons. I'm just going to run that report though. And if we click on OK, that will then generate the report. So if we open that, or you can save it, it's entirely up to yourself. I'm just going to open it, otherwise I'd end up with loads of the things on my screen. And there's your report. So it's quite straightforward to generate reports anyway. But if you want just specific bits of information and you can't find a report that does it, then, or if there isn't a report that does it, then you can actually use the extractor instead. So as I say, you just go into settings, click on extractor, and it will then bring up this screen here, which is still loading at the moment. There we go. So don't worry too much about that. It's more likely to be my computer that's causing that. So this is the extractor screen, and on here you can generate anything you like, really. You'll notice that the options in the design panel here reflect what you have on the navigator. So your personnel, payroll, employer, administration, security. So they are all options that you see on the navigator on the left-hand side of the screen. And they carry all the information that are in those menus as well, or most of them anyway. So I'm just going to pick up something basic here. We'll just create a report which has got the employee's ID number, and you can click on there and then use the arrowhead to take them in. Or if you prefer to, you can double click. It doesn't really matter which way you do it. It works either way. And date of birth, hire date. You can also rearrange them as well. So for instance, you've got first forename there. If we click up, it will then move that to the second menu. You can do it with the arrowhead down as well. You can also delete information too. So if you highlight it and click the left-hand arrowhead, then it will just take you back out again. So simple enough to do that. You can also specify the format that you want it in as well. So Excel, Presenter, Export, or Word. A number of different ways that you can edit the information here. You can also decide whether to give people access to the system by clicking Use, access to edit that report, and even access to delete it. If you leave those unticked, they won't see your report. I'm going to create it just as a use report though, so it will still be there. Once you've got your options set up, you can then decide on some of the other information as well. So criteria is just really, if you want to assign it to people, that kind of thing. But if we look at the sort option, you can also tell it what column you want to sort by, and then whether or not it's ascending or descending. Display is just a way of changing the wording on here. So I've got first forename there. If I highlight first forename, it appears in display, but I might just want it to say forename. Not everybody has two forenames, so you might just want it to say forename. So I will do that. And we just take that out. I don't want the criteria set on there. So this is coming up thing, and it'll ask if I'm sure I want to change this at this point. If you ever get a screen like this where it's just white with a little bit of text at the top, it's always a good idea to let it run its course, because if you try to close one of these screens before it's finished, it will just close the system down and you'll have to log back in again. So it's always a good idea to let it run its course, bring up the heading that it wants. There we go. In this case, it's because it's telling me off for having a blank field, and then closing it that way. So always the best way of doing things. So we're doing those again there. You also have other options that you can use on here as well. So you can choose whether or not you want to have the type in uppercase or lowercase. You can also choose whether you want it to count the lines as well. So there are a few different options on there that you can use. So the function button is the one where you can decide, depending on the data that you've got holding, is how you want it to display it. And then the summary one here, the only option you tend to have is count. So you don't have much of a choice with that one. Once you've actually got your report set up, you can then run it. So you've got this run button here, and if you click on run, it will ask you if you want to do it interactively or background. Interactively just means straight away. So if you click on that, it will then just generate the report. So you can see it's just opened that report for me at the bottom, and there's the report that we've created today. So there's all the information, got everything in there, and that's your report. So I'm not going to save it because, again, I'd end up with lots of the things because I do these a lot, but that's how you generate the report. If you want to keep the report, you can save it. If you want to open the report after you've saved it, then you can then open it through the top there. There are a couple of other options though. So as I say, if you click run, and then choose background, it will still let you run it now, but you can also set a schedule for it as well. So you can tell it what date you want it to run and when. You can also click on advanced, and it'll allow you to set it up so that it will run it on a regular basis every month or week or whatever as well. I won't go into that bit because it's just a series of other menus with date headings on them, but it is possible to do that. So there are a few different ways that you can use this. Now, once you've actually created one, as I say, if you don't want to come into here, so you don't want to go in and find it that way, then if you close this down, and once again, it wants me to it's asking if I want to save this or not. So it's coming up with this screen. As I say, yours shouldn't be quite so slow as mine can be. Computer can be a bit steam powered. It gets a lot of heavy use. But once we get the menu up, I'm just going to click no on that because I don't want to save it. I've already got quite a few of them in there already, so we don't want to keep adding them in. But once you've actually created your extract report, that will then show in the favorites as well. So if you wanted to add it into the favorites, then you just go into extract, and they'd all show on there. You decide which one you wanted, and then it would just generate in the screen there. So in this case, if we click on test there, you still get to run the process. It's just a little bit quicker because you're not having to go into quite so many menus even. So that is the extractor reports. The final thing that we have on here is the console. All the console is for is it's a little bit like the system information that you have on your computer. You open up to close down functions and what have you. So on here, you tend to find this is more used by Moorepay. We tend to use this for reference purposes, but it does show a list of all the system processes that are running. So as I say, it's a bit like the task manager on the computer, but it also shows you any scheduled reports that might be running as well, and also what imports have been done on the system too. So there is quite a lot of information on there, but it's unlikely that you'd ever really use most of it. The next one that we have on the side here is the question mark, the help. Now, at this point, I'm going to go into, close the favorites down, go back into personnel and go into hire. And the reason that I'm going to do that is we're going to be obvious in a moment. So the help tab has a couple of different options on it. First of all, session information. So it's mostly technical data relating to the running of the session that you're on when you log into the system, but it also says you has a session ID if required, and also user information. So if you ever speak to the technical team, you have a problem, they may require some of this information. The same goes for the about, because all the about is for is to tell you what build number you're on. Everybody should have the same one really, but occasionally it might be required to ask you what that is. The main and most useful menu that we have in here, though, is Contents. The Contents menu is the help files. So it's nice, nice and easy to use. If you're in a menu, so I've gone into the higher screen here, and if I click on Contents, that takes me into the help files. But not only that, because I'm actually on the higher screen, it takes me straight to the higher screen. So if I don't know what a screen is for, if you log in and you're not sure what the screen is that you're in, then you can click on the contents and it'll take you to the page all about it. It'll also give you the subheadings that are on the screen as well. So if you want to look a little bit deeper into it, you can do that too. Obviously, it's not just for that though. If you want to just search for something, then you can do that too. There's also an advanced search option further on. You got the grey button there next to the cross, but it can just be used as an ordinary database as well. So you can search and you can refine the search with the advanced function. The final button along the top is the personal button. So first of all, it shows you when you last logged in, so you can see that on the screen here today. And it also allows you to log out and change your password and personalize. Now, personalize sounds like it's editing the system, but it's not really. It's just hotkeys. So if you want to create a hotkey for a particular function, then you just click on the blue button on one of the controls there, and I'm going to pick up Payslips again. So I've saved that against CTRL1. So we save that, close it down. And then if I just use Control-1, obviously you can't see me doing that with my keyboard, but if I just Control-1, that will take me to Payslips. So it's just another way of creating shortcuts, really. Now, I don't know about yourself, but personally, that would be useless to me because I would forget which control buttons I had assigned to what functions. So I'm going to clear that out. I would never use it in a million years, but a lot of people do. There's a lot of people who still like those. So if you want to use that, you can. Personally, I think it would normally be the search function or favorites that I'd be using there. So that's the function buttons along the top of the screen that we've been through now. So the next thing we'll just have a quick look at, because there won't be a lot of information on here for people if they're just running payroll, but that is the right-hand widget. So I mentioned the widget earlier because I said that you can close that down so that you can expand the screen a bit. But the widget is just a way of viewing some of the information. So first of all, you can see that you've got access to my reports on there. So when the system lets you know that your reports are ready, you just click on the link on here and that will take you to the portal so that you can then download your reports. It's important to make sure that you download your reports before you clear down the period, which I will show you in a little while, because if you don't download your reports before you clear the period, you'll lose the reports. So it's very important to make sure that you do that before you start processing the next period. But I will go into that in a bit more detail later on. If you have archive reports, by the way, you don't need to worry about it. But a lot of people don't bother with the archive reports, so it is important just to make sure that you get those out before you start processing another period. If you have any information about sickness or absence in there, then it might tell you who's off, and you might also view information about sick costs as well. So a lot depends really on what you actually have in the system, and this is why I say a lot of people don't hold that kind of data on their payroll system, so you may find that there won't be anything there. You've also got employee events. They probably will be, because that's just things like dates they started with the company, birthdays, that kind of thing. So you'll find that that sort of information will be there by default because that's always in the system anyway. It's required data. The last thing is the phone book. So I did mention earlier that employees can see this, but they can only see work-related data. You might have more information on here. You can search on here as well if you want to. So I'll just put that in there so it just filters out people. And you can also click on details and it'll pull up a little bit more information. Essentially, you won't have a lot of data in here again if it's a payroll system. If it's HR, it's a different matter. You are holding a lot more data about staff in that, but the payroll system, you won't normally have all that much in there. So that's the widget. If we just open up those screens again, and we will then move on to the navigator, because this is the most important part of the system, really, the navigator on the left hand side, and there are a number of menus on there. Now logically you'd think I'd just go down the list, but I am going to start halfway downish because I find it's easier to actually use it in the order that you might use the menus and if they connect with each other. In the case of the one I'm going to start with, which is the employer menu, it doesn't connect to anything, so it's better just to get that one out of the way. Otherwise you find yourself tripping over it halfway through the explanation. So the employer tab has two menus, or in your case you may find there's only one because you may not have the gender pay gap reports. It depends on whether you wanted them or not. The one you will definitely have is employer contacts, because this is where all the data about the company is stored. Now, you'd have given this data to your implementation consultant, and it's very important that this is always up to date, because if any of it's wrong, the data would be wrong that goes to HMRC, and also you might be that you're letting the wrong people have access if they need to speak to Moorepay. So to view your information, if you've got more than one company, you'd have to search it anyway. But even if you've only got one company, you still have to select it from the top. So I've just clicked into there. I've got Core Managed Payroll. It's not a very imaginative name, but that's the name. And there's not a lot of data in there, but you will have all of your address and everything in there. So it's important when you first get access to your system, this is one of the first things that you need to check, just to make sure that all the data on here is right, addresses, reference numbers, etc. And then if we scroll down, make sure that the contact information is correct as well, because if you're not on there, then we can't speak to you. GDPR, of course, is very important these days. So you have to be on here, otherwise we can't speak to you. So it's always important to make sure this is updated. If you ever do need to update it, then you speak to the support team and they will get that sorted out for you. The gender pay gap reports, it generates a series of reports with various information relating to gender pay gap and the pay elements on the system. So you can just pick up your reports from here. It's just a quick case of double clicking on them to open them up after you've run the payroll. So that's the employee tab, or the employer tab even, sorry. The next one that we're going to have a look at is the personnel menu. So that's the one at the top of the screen here. And this is where all the data about your staff is held. Okay, so you can view your current employee data and amend it when required. You can record new starters and leavers, things like that. Now, when you click into this, it will go bold, and it will do that with everything. So whenever you click on an option in here, it will always bolden like that. To put a new starter in, there are two ways that you can do that actually. You've got the new starter wizard, and you've got the higher screen. Now, I'm not going to use the new starter wizard, but if we just show you briefly how that works. So on here, you just get a list of tabs, and you have to go through the tabs to record the data. So if we put in, first of all, the company code, that's always important. You have to have the company code. And the position ID. So this is, as I say, we've only got employee default or system admin. You might have manager. You might even have some that you've invented yourself. It's entirely up to yourself. But normally, for the payroll side, you'd only have the two. Applicant ID is something that is bespoke, so you'd only have that in there if you've specified it. So don't worry too much if you don't know what it is. It just means that you don't need it, that's all. But you'd use a drop down if you do. As it happens though, you only actually need to populate the company code and the position ID. If you don't do those, because they have a red asterisk next to them, so if you don't do those, it won't let you onto the next screen. You click next, it'll take you onto the next screen. So it's very simple way of creating it. Once you've gone through all the screens, then you just click finish, and that will then put that employee into the system. Now, if you're not using the costing side of the service, so you'll know whether or not you're doing that because we'd have been given the information, then this is possibly the best way of doing it. Because if you have any new starters, when you're putting them in here, it allows you to do the new starter declaration on this screen without you having to go elsewhere for it. So from that point of view, if you're not using costing, I would recommend using the wizard. However, if you're using costing, it's actually easier to use the higher screen, which is the other way of doing it. It does mean that if you don't have all the starter information, you have to go into another screen, but there's generally a lot more costing data than there is starter information. So I'm just going to close this down now, click cancel on there. And that just takes us back to the main screen again. It always defaults back to employer for some reason, and I'm not entirely certain why. So that's the new starter wizard, but the next one that we have is the higher screen. Now the higher screen has essentially the same data on it that the new starter wizard has, apart from, as I say, you don't get the new starter declaration, but you do get all the costing data. Now for this one, it's better if we close down the navigator and close down the widget because there's a lot of information on the screen. So you can see the apprentice start date is on there. You've got company code. So once again, you have to fill all these bits in like the core company code, position ID, etc. I am not going to create an employee, but you see how it works. Employee number, depending on your implementation, depends on what happens here. So if you have it set up so that you generate your own numbers, you just type the number in here. If you don't, then you just leave it as 0, and when you save it, the employee will be assigned a number from the system. So it depends which way you've got your implementation set up with that. You then have all your basic information like title, surname, forename, all of that down to postal code. And then you've got date of birth, gender, age, marital status. Anything with an asterisk next to it, the red asterisk, you do have to fill in, but anything else is not a requirement. So your status starter, the employee will always show as a starter on the first payroll. You can change that if you want to, but there's not really any reason why you would. But after you've run the payroll for the first time for that person, it will then automatically default to current at the top of the screen. So that will happen on its own. Now this is the bit where it gets a little bit, as say, regarding the new starter declaration, because there is no new starter declaration in here. So if you've got a P45, that's fine, you can just fill this in. But if you don't have that, then you have to just leave it as it is there and then fill in the starter declaration elsewhere, which I'll show you shortly. It will always default to the next pay period that you're going to run. And you can change that, but again, there wouldn't be an awful lot of point. And then week 1 month, whether it's emergency tax code or not. So if you don't put any data in here, it will default to emergency until you change it. Tax regime doesn't really affect you if you're in England or Northern Ireland. That's just whether it's using the Scottish or the Welsh tax regimes. So if you're in Scotland, then the tax regime is S for Scotland. And the tax regime for Wales is C for Cymru, which is the Welsh for Wales. After that, you've got the NI table letter. Now, it's always important, you have to have that. So if you're not sure what you need to put into that, it's always better to ask HMRC. The data should be on a P45, but if you don't have the P45, it's always better to seek information and help from HMRC with regards to that one. National insurance number, you'll notice, is not asterisked. Obviously, you do need it, but if you don't have it, it will still let you run the payroll. HMRC will pick that up and sort it out for you. Director basis, so whether or not the employee is a director and whether they're using director's NI or just standard employee NI. Again, you should know that yourself. If you're not sure, then you might have to seek guidance on that. And there's also a tick box if the person is a pensioner as well. Date of joining is self-explanatory, as when they started with the company, but the continuous service date is only if they're being paid over to you from another company. So if you've taken over somebody else and all their staff are moving onto your payroll, then the continuous service date will normally be the date they started with the company that's being taken over. Then you've got all the costing information. And as you can see on here, we've only got 3 bits here. So the departmental code, which you always have to fill in, but if you don't, it will just use the default. You'll find that if you don't use costing, there won't be anything but the default. We've just put all this stuff in ourselves. We've got default and sales on that one. And then the cost center, again, it will normally be just one, but you might find that there are more. But the thing is, there are all these things, pay point, primary, secondary, reference, etc., which you may have asked us to put into the system, depending on the complexity of your costing model. And that's the reason why, if you're using the costing system, it's better to fill it in on here. Below that, you've got employee pay details, so you can either put in their annual salary, so you give them the hours, tell it the date that it's effective from and how much that is, and then it can do the working out for that over the year for reporting processes. And then the hourly paid one takes you back to the top of the screen. You have to scroll all the way back down again, but that also gives you the weekly basic hours, but then it changes this so that you can tell it what the hourly rate is for the person. And if that person is just fixed and they always do the same hours, then when it asks, do you want to pay the hours and rate automatically, you can just hit yes. If that person varies a lot though, then you can click no instead, and you can just enter the data manually. Things like grade, payslip options, etc., the sick reference scheme, that depends whether you've got those set up. So again, we won't see anything on here for that. And then payslip option, it will normally just default to global use, which will be whichever one you decided that you wanted, but you can also change it if you want to on there too. Below that, you've got your statutory sick pay working pattern and also your standard working pattern as well. So that will depend again if you're using that part of the system, but also if you have quite complicated patterns, then you're better off just leaving it as the default anyway, as far as that goes. So that's the working patterns, and then below that we've got bank details as well, which is self-explanatory. That's just where your data goes for the bank if you're paying by backs. Once you've done that, you then just save it, and you have then created your employee. They will now show on the system. So you save at the top, and that will then put them into the payroll for you. So that's how you create an employee. That's how you put them in there. But also in the personnel menu, you've also got a personal details screen. So once you've created the employee, if you need to change that information, then you can go into there. I'm not going to save that. I'm not creating any employees. But if you need to amend the information, then all you do is you go to the top of the screen here where you've got the search option, and then put in part of the person's name or the whole of the person's name if you want to. It doesn't really matter. And then you select the person, and it allows you to fill in the data for them. Just as an aside, whilst we're here, the top of the screen, the search function also has an advanced search option. So if you have lots of people with the same names, like my surname Evans, it's hardly uncommon. There's usually a few of them in a business. Then you can specify. You can actually use the advanced search and fill in extra fields if you want to. You can also choose to open that up so that you can see your searches, or if you want to see both windows at the same time, you can click on the padlock and it'll let you do that. So that will then hold them open for you. So once you've actually changed the information on here, you then save it and it lets you carry on. So that is how you amend personal information on the system. But you can also change other details as well. So you've got contact details as well. Works exactly the same way. You just pick up the person. So it's going to keep on Charles Hardy because that's who I selected earlier. So if you need to put any extra information in there, you can do. Position. So this screen allows you to show the access rights that people have on the system. So in Charles Hardy's case, he's just an employee default. But if you want to change into system admin, you can do from there. And you can also change his department. So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can edit the department list as well from here. You can see there's an edit button there, so you can add new ones in or change the names of the departments. You can do what you like from that. Once you've done that though, then you've also got a position history screen as well, so you can see what changes have been made to that person's position in the company. So on here, Charles Hardy has been a system administrator. Currently, he's an employee. So you can see a history of the movements within the system on there. Also, you'll notice we've got employee pay details as well. So this screen allows you to view contractual details and also allows you to amend them if need be. So you've got the payroll status, basic hours, whether they are annual salaried or hourly paid, their effective dates, so that's when their salary starts and what the salary is. If you want to change that, then you can just put in the end date, save it, and then put in a new salary, and just effective from that date then. So once you've done that, once again, you can save it. You can also change the patterns on here as well, the same way that you could in the employee screen. So all that data relating to the pay side of that person, you can just do it all through here, save that, and it will then amend it for you. Also, a little bit further down, you've got a number of other options which set a wizard, learning benefits, etc. Now, you'll never use those because most of those are HR related. So although they are built into the system, you will be unlikely to use them as if you are only using the payroll side of the system. Just as an aside, before we go into anything else on here, I would just like to go into the admin screen briefly, because there is an option in here which is called mass change. Now that's in the payroll tab. And if we go to mass change, no, I don't want to save the changes. So if you ever have a salary increase, for instance, or a bonus or something like that, then you can change, and you need to change that for everybody, then you can do that in here. So for instance, if we have a salary, and click next on there, it will only let you click one of those options at a time. It won't let you do lots of them all at once. But once you've actually opened this screen up, you can then see you've got a list of all the employees. And on there, you can go down and you can change their data. So if you wanted to give this one here a 2% pay rise, then you can do that. And not only will it show the 2%, it'll show the difference in their wage and what it will then become. So you can do it that way. Or if you want to give them a value related change, then you can do that as well. So if you wanted to give this one £4,000, you can see there it's got 2.11 on there instead now. So it's a 2.11% pay rise that they're getting. Equally though, you can do a mass change for them as well. So if you wanted to give them all a 2% pay rise, then you just click on all, go to 2, save that, close it, And you can see if we scroll back along, everyone's got a 2% pay rise and then the value on there as well. You can also add a value on as well. So if you wanted to give everybody £200 extra, you could put that in here and save it, and it would just add an extra £200 onto everybody's salary. So that's the mass changes function, which I just wanted to go through briefly, because although it's related to the pay run, it's not something that really comes up in the future, so we just go to that one while we're here. So I just close this down. Yes, I want to close the wizard. There we go. And we are going to go back to the top of the screen now, back into the personnel details, and we're going to have a look at significant dates. So this is where you create leavers. So if you've got anybody leaving the company, then you do it here. So once again, you have to search for the person in the top screen. I've already got one open. And where it's got payroll status current, what you would have to do is change that to leaver. And that will then allow you to enter a leave date and a leave reason as well. So you might find that these are all different to yours. The only one that will be the same is 99 deceased, because that's an HMRC one, and it's the only one that they actually use for official purposes. So you click OK on that. And then once you've done that, if we just close the widget down for a moment, you can see here it's got P45 printed. So the system will actually pass the information through. Moorepay will generate the P45. So you don't have to do that part of it. We do that bit. So you just generate the lever and we will then send them the P45 for you. So once you put the date in there, then you just save it, and that's the employee set as a lever. You always do that part when you're doing the starters. So you do fill in your starters, fill in your levers, then you run the payroll, and that's the process. So we've been through the personnel menu now, showing you all the personal details, how to enter those. We've also looked at setting levers, how to create new starters, and also had a quick look at the mass change screen as well if you ever needed to put in a lot of wage changes at once. We are now going to have a look at the payroll menu. So this is where you run everything from. And this is where you put in all the values and everything before you send them off to ourselves. So in the payroll menu, the first one that you have on there is the calendar. Now this is a view only screen, and this information would have been given to us when you first had the implementation set up. It's just a list of your pay dates, period end date, submission date, all that information that you need to run the payroll properly and on time. So this is just a view only thing for your own reference. After that, you've got timesheets. Now, a lot of people, like me, when I first started here, would think of a timesheet as something that somebody fills in order to tell their employer how many hours they've worked or whatever. In our case, the timesheet is just a way of putting in temporary payments on the system. Whether it's done by the employee or whether it's done by an administrator or a manager, doesn't matter. It's still called a timesheet. So if you're just putting the information in manually, this is the way that you do it. There are two ways, in fact. You can either do a timesheet, and that's just for each individual employee. So if you've only got a few staff, that's the quickest way of doing it. But also there's a bulk timesheet entry as well. So if you have a lot of staff, then that's probably the easiest way. So with the standard timesheet, all you do is select the employee from the top of the screen. So again, we've still got Charles Hardy here. And then all you do is you go down the list, picking up the rates that you want and adding the values in. So whether it's an hourly rate or a paid rate, it will know that from the element that you're using. So all the pay elements that are built into the system for you will be in this screen. You can just pick the ones that you want, fill them in for the employee, and then save them. And that's the job done. So it's quite straightforward to use. As I say, that's the easiest way of doing it if you only have a few staff, but it's not the best way of doing it if you want to create a lot of payments as well. So if you want to make a lot of payments, if you've got a lot of staff, 20, 30 staff maybe, then the easiest way to do it is to use the bulk timesheet entry instead. So this, as I say, is only, say, maybe 20 or 30 staff or more, then it's probably better to do it this way. Okay. Now, before you can actually create a form, the first thing that you have to do is tell it what pay elements you want to appear in that form. And that requires actually going into the administration screen to create it. So when we generate a new form here, one of the questions is what the template is. So we've got a number of them on here. I'll show you how to create one of those first, because you can't go any further if you don't have a template to use. So what we do is we go into the admin menu and we go to Payroll and we go down to Bulk Timesheets Templates. Now, to create a new one, you just click on New and give it a name. I'm not going to save this, we already have quite a few of them. Description, and then tell it which company it is that you're doing it for. Now, on here, you can see there are a number of tick boxes as well. So you've got display code totals, edit rates, etc. So display totals, that just means it'll calculate the values as you go through the payroll. And edit rates, that just gives you the option to change the rate. So for hourly rates, for instance, an employee might already have the rate in the system, but if you want to change that rate on the bulk timesheet, then you can tick the box and it will let you do that. And then total value override. So if you've got any fixed rates in there, then this will actually allow you to change the fixed rates. So things like salaries, which are part of the system anyway, if you had those in the on the timesheet, then you'd be able to edit them if you tick this box. And then below that, you've got template types, so whether it's an expense or it's a timesheet. So it would always be a timesheet normally. So once you've done that, once you've filled in all that information, you would then go down here, and once again you'll see a whole list of every single pay element that has been built into the system for you by the implementation team. So when you get this, all you do is tick the ones that you want to see in there. So you just tick the boxes, and then once you've done that, you save it, and that will create the template for you. So at this point, if I just go into the search at the top here and pick up the bonus one as an example. So on here, it had the name bonus, description is bonus, display code totals, yes, we've agreed to that one. But on here, the only one that we've got ticked is bonus, because that's the only one we want to see on the template. So that's how you create the spreadsheet template for the bulk timesheets. Once you've actually created your template, you can then go back into the payroll run, go back down to timesheets and go into bulk timesheet entry. And from here, you can then generate a new form. So I'm going to generate this form and I'm going to call it bonuses. Now, there are two different ways that you can generate a timesheet. If you've got costing data, then you can use the advanced model, but we won't go into that today because all it is, it's the same as the standard one. It's just that it allows you to put in costing data and split it across different cost centers and the like, so it gives you extra columns to do that. We're just going to show the basic one today though. So if we click on basic, and then choose the template. So I showed you the bonus one earlier just to show it only had a bonus payment on it, so we'll use that one as an example. Data entry user, if you want to, you can assign it to other users. So we only have 2 users who are actually authorized. They're Abby Jones and Kay Jefferson, but I'm not going to do that. If you don't fill that in, any administrator can still activate it anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference. Down here, you can filter it out. So if you want to just create the template for a specific department or cost center, you can just specify them on here. And then once you've done that and you're quite happy with it, you just save it, and that's your template generated. So in a moment, it'll appear on the screen here. So after that, you've got 2 different ways that you can fill in this. First of all, you can just highlight it. Now you can see here, this one here says imported. Once it shows imported, you can't do anything with it. The only way you can amend this data is in the employee's individual timesheet, which I showed you just a few minutes ago before we did the bulk one. However, ours is still open. So if we click on this drill down, this magnifying glass on the side here, that will then open up the template. And you can see here, it's got all the employees and their cost centers and everything. But at the end, it's got bonus because that was the only one that we ticked on the template. So you could then just go down the list and put the amounts in, typing anything randomly there as I'm going down. Once you've filled in all that data, you then click Validate and Finalize, and that will just tell you if there's any errors, so if you've managed to mistype anything. And then once you're happy with it, you can then import it. I would point out at this juncture that if you save it and come out, you can just go back in again later on. It's only after you've validated and imported that you can't do anything with it. So that's one way of doing the bulk timesheet. But if we close that down, you will notice that at the far end here, we've got an import and an export button. So this timesheet, it may be that you've got all your bonuses on a CSV or an Excel file with all the employees' names on so that you can just fill it in. So rather than having to type it all in, you might prefer to just copy it. For that reason, there's an export option. So if we click export to CV, to CSV even, and there we go. It's being a bit slow there. I wonder what was going on with it, but it's done it now. So we've got the save option on there. So you can export to CSV, and then once you've saved it, you can then open that file. And as you can see there, we've got a list of all the staff, and at the end, you've got the bonus there. So as long as your file that you have with all the bonuses on is in the same order as the employees on here, then you'd be fine. So you have to sort it and make sure that they both correspond. But then all you'd have to do is copy that column into here, save it, and then once you've saved it, you could then click on Import from CSV, browse, pick up the file, validate it. So you just click on Run Process, and total records. Now on there, the reason why it's doing that is because I've got no data in it, but what you'd have is a list of all your bonuses. So once you were happy with that, then you would then go back the screen on there, go into import from CSV again, choose perform update, browse, select the right one again, and then you'd run the process. Now once you've done that, had you put any data in it, then what would happen is you would see all the bonuses would be in the system there. So once you're happy with that, if you want to click validate and finalize, just to make sure there are no errors, there we go. And then once you're happy with it, but only when you're happy with it, you can import this to the timesheet. So that is how you import a timesheet on the system. Now, as I say, once you've imported it, you can't change it anymore. You can only do that before it's imported. But if you find that you do need to make any last minute changes, you can just go into the employee's individual timesheets. All that data will have been imported into the timesheet, and you would just be able to amend it on here. So it's still editable, even if you have actually already imported it. So that's how you put in all your temporary payments, and that means that you would normally be ready to start using the processing side of the system. However, there is also the issue of permanent payments. So if we go into the payroll run again and go down to the manage payroll button there and go into employee, there are a number of options in here, so I'll just go through a few of these. First of all, you've got HMRC documents. So I mentioned earlier that if you use the higher screen, you can't put in any new starter information. So if you need to do that for anybody, if you've used a higher screen, this is the screen that you go into to do that. So if we just open this up again, so on here, you can change the document type to starter checklist no P45. And then if you scroll down the screen here, it's got the tax code, but you've also got the starter declaration. So you can choose which one actually corresponds to the employee. So normally you'd have a form that they'd fill in so that you'd be able to pick it up off there. But if you're not sure, then you can use the contents in the help, and there is a link on there so that it will show you. But also you can check with HMRC as well. So once you've actually done the starter details in there, you can then save it, but you can also change the data in here if you need to for any other reason as well. Just click save, and that's the employee saved and sorted. Also, you've got NI and RTI details, and the NI and RTI details screen is exactly what it sounds like. It's got the national insurance number on it, NI table letter data, so you can amend everything about the tax regime and the like. You can amend all that here. Current SSP details is just a read-only screen, so if you're putting in data about employee sickness, it will actually pull it back out here for you. And then we've also got payment codes. Now, as I mentioned, you might have other payments, permanent payments, that you don't want to put in the temporary ones because they're the same every month. So things like car allowances and that kind of thing. So you would put those into the payment codes. So once again, you just select the employee in question. And once you've selected the employee, you have a list of all the payments and all the deductions that are in the system. And I will just close the navigator here because you'll notice that there is actually another slide bar there, so you can see there's a lot more in there. So things like pensions or attachment of earnings orders, they may appear in here. Also all of your other pay elements. So if you want to do things like add a car allowance in, which is the same every month, then you could just put that in here. And the same goes for any permanent deductions like loans or anything like that. You can put it all in here, and then you don't have to worry about entering it in on the temporary amounts. Once you've entered them, you just save it, and that's everything done. So that's the permanent the permanent payments and deductions, and really, apart from if you want to edit your split codes or anything like that, then that's all that you need to know about in that screen. So once you've got all your permanent payments into the system and you've also run all the temporary ones for the month, you're then at the point where you can start processing your payroll. So once you're quite happy with everything and you don't think you need to do any more changes, you can then go into Payroll, Managed Payroll, Processing. So this is where all the final bits are done to get all the data over to us. So the first one that you have there is the payroll process status. So if we go into that, that just gives you a list of the tasks that the system is processing and at what point you're at. So every time you do one of these tasks, it will then show it on the screen here. So we've just got a couple of them on here. There's the clear down bit, because somebody at some point has done something a bit odd. Instead of doing the lockdown on it, it's got the clear down. Usually it won't let you do that. It's only because this has been imported that way, I think, with the system. So payroll status, you can just go back to this for reference to see what's going on. However, before you do anything else, if you have access to preview reports, so if you've subscribed to preview reports, then you can click on the preview reports button and all your preview reports will be in there. You just double click on the one that you want and that will generate it for you. Once you've looked at the preview reports and you're happy with everything, if you need to change anything at that point, as I say, you might want to go into the timesheets and make any amendments, but then come back in again. But once you're absolutely happy with it, you know that you can carry on to the next step, you can then go into the lockdown payroll. So the lockdown payroll option here, this is where you pass on all the information to us. So if we just close the navigator down for a moment, start by viewing company code, because we need to know which company it is that you're working from. And then on here, if you've got any documents to upload, so P45s for new starters maybe, or any other HMRC information, parental leave forms, so maternity forms, and MAP-B1 and the like, because we do that bit for you, so you'd upload those on here as well. Once you've saved those, then you can come back out. So as long as all you're doing is saving this screen, so it's got save entries for uploading, you won't be locking it down. So you can come back and make any other alterations or any other uploads that you want to do. So once you're happy though, and you've uploaded all the documents and everything is as it should be on here, you then have to tick the box at the bottom, click Run Process, and that will lock down the payroll. At that point, you can't do anything else with it. So this then notifies us to process the payroll on your behalf. It needs to be done 8 working days before, and that includes the pay date. So 8 working days before the pay date. If you have any amendments, then you usually have around 2 days to contact your payroll contact to make the changes at this point. So if you do have any urgent ones that need to be done, you can contact us to do that. Once this has been done, though, the payroll screen will be locked down and the database will show that the payroll is in progress. So if we go back into payroll processing status, then what you'd see on here for the current period is lockdown submitted, and it'd have the dates, and then it would show lockdown completed. Once it's showing that the lockdown is completed, you can then do the payroll clear down. So this is what you need to do about 2 to 3 days after the pay date. And that's just the next screen here. So you've got an uploaded documents history, so you can see what you've uploaded if you've forgotten. But payroll clear down, is the next box that we need. So once again, you select the company, but there's nothing else that you have to do except tick the box, run the process, and that will then do the clear down. So that allows it to move into the next pay period. Although we say that you should do this 2 to 3 days after the pay date, the later you leave it, the better, because if you do have to make any changes or anything or amendments, then you've got that option. But as soon as you're ready to start putting in any new starters or set any levers or anything, you have to do this bit before you can do that. Once again, if we go back to the payroll processing status, you would actually see that in the current pay period, it will give you the dates for when it's done everything. After that, it will then show the payroll unlock, submitted and completed. Again, this is quite quick. You can see on here it all happens quite quickly. Once the unlock completed shows, that means you can start entering data for the next period. So that's how you run the payroll. So once you've done that, you're all ready to start all over again for the next period. And you've really done the process. Just one thing here, you'll notice there's a tax year-end declaration button here. So this is done, as you would guess, once a year, and the payroll team will actually guide you through that process nearer to the time. There's not much point going through it until you actually need to do it, but it's quite straightforward anyway. Now, the other thing that we have in here is pay and pension letters. So if you want to view the pay slips, you can do that from here. Same goes for P60s and pension letters if we're doing the pension side for you as well. But it's really just questions. You can see here we're still looking at Charles Hardy. Here's a list of all the slips on there and what the pay method is on the system for him. So you can view the pay slips just by clicking on the drill down button there. You also get those on the preview as well, of course, but if you just want to view it in the system, then you can do that from here too. Works the same for P60s as well. Obviously, we generate the P60s for employees, but you've got the option in here. Now, just one other thing, just while we're on the subject, if we go back into administration and then go to payroll, and you have a number of options in there. So as a system admin, you can choose which payslips the employee can view. So if you go into payslip run options, I won't go through all the functions that you have in here because that's more of a thing that would happen for an on-site day. There's so many of them, but this is just for the essentials. But on here, you can actually say which payslips people can see. So on there, you can see the periods, and you can just say on here whether or not yes or no, whether they can actually view the payslips. Okay, so got the payslip there yourself so that you can view it. But as I say, depending on what you actually type into here, just say whether it's active or not, then you can actually show and hide those on there, confirm the payslip change, and it will actually show or hide the payslips for you. I'm not going to do that now, but it gives you the option for that. So that's how you view the payslips and also how you show which payslips people can see and which they can't. So if you don't want to release them early or whatever, if you processed, you can hide them until you're ready for them to be viewable by the employees. So that's everything that we're going to go through today on the webinar. I hope it's been useful for you. But if you do have any further queries, obviously you can speak to either your implementation consultant if you're still within the implementation period, or you'll have your own advisor that you can contact if you have any queries through there as well. Obviously, there's the help bits in the system too, so there are a lot of different ways that we support you if you do have any queries. But thank you very much for your time today, and I hope the rest of your day is good. Thank you. Goodbye.